Welcome to Aspire, and I Have the Right To podcast, where we amplify voices, share stories, and drive change in the fight against sexual assault. We explore the critical issues surrounding student safety, institutional accountability, and survivor empowerment. In every episode, our goal is to provide insightful conversations with survivors, experts, educators, and advocates, giving you, our listener, valuable information, resources, and actionable steps to create safer environments and cultivate a culture of respect and consent. Today, we're going to be addressing the topic of mental health and masculinity. And we are very pleased today to have our guest, Steve Peacock. Steve is many things. It is very hard to describe Steve. Steve is, first and foremost, for me, a dear friend, someone who is courageous and a beacon of light in the advocacy world. He is a survivor. He is a father, a husband, a caring individual, and most importantly, he is willing to open up his heart and talk about a very important topic that is near and dear to him about mental health and how masculinity impacts that. So, Steve, thank you so much for joining us today.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. Really look forward to the discussion.
So a message to our listeners today. As we were preparing for this podcast, we all agreed that this could be a very intense topic for us all today. And I wanted to share with our listeners something that we always say when we meet with audiences, when we present to schools or in other spaces, that should you need a break, a timeout, please don't hesitate to put the podcast on pause. Make sure that you are supporting yourself, connect with a loved one, speak to anyone. But these are tough topics. We want to acknowledge that upfront as we dive in. So, leading to our topic, we want to focus on sort of personal experiences, but I think it's important for us to tee up the topic of mental health, especially the mental health of boys and young men, and talk about where we think the state of men today is. Steve, do you have any comments on that front?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. First of all, we don't know what we don't know. So we're all in our own heads. We have our own experiences. And as a child, I grew up in a family of 7 men and 2 women. It was a very male-dominated personal family experience, very active members of the church, which is obviously has a very male-centric ideology, and in our culture. So the classic things, part of this is generational, but part of it is gender, which is being able to sit with feelings, think about feelings, be able to express feelings, understand them. The depth of them was just not something that was practiced in my household. Part of that was a big family, but part of it was the choices, either intentional or not, on how to raise that family. My mother's mother died when she was 9. My father was raised by a strict Catholic household, so didn't really have the modeling of how to be able to understand, express, and process feelings. And therefore, at least in my house, we were pretty much focused on outward happiness and outward joy, whether it was through sports, whether it was through humor, whether it was through watching TV or movies, and that became our language. So instead of learning about the value of emotional connections, we really kept a lot on the surface, so that when I was sexually abused, I had no vocabulary to even understand what happened. I had no ability to process it in a way that made me realize that it was bad, and therefore didn't tell anyone for 10 years. And then when I did finally talk about it, the response was as if like I broke a leg or an arm. That's too bad. You know, let's bury this as quickly as possible. I think one of the comments was, "I'm glad you have Kim, my then fiance." So not a emotional response, or not a opportunity for discussion and support, but just a knee-jerk reaction, as they had throughout their lives and our families' lives, to kind of push it down. So, when I think about all the modeling and all the generational experiences that went into that, that's really at the heart of what we need to address, so that, if you feel lonely, if you feel vulnerable, if you feel upset, it's not yours to bear alone. But when you do bear it and somebody says, "I don't care," or "I can't help you," or "that's too bad," right? You're just going to push that down. And then it's going to take a lifetime to figure out how to turn that on its head and react differently.
Thank you for sharing that, Steve. And unfortunately, I think your experience is all too common for anyone that has faced trauma or abuse, in terms of hearing these familiar phrases of "let's move on," "you're fine," "get over it," pushing these feelings down instead of trying to bring things out in the open and discuss. And again, I refer to Dr. Niobe Way and this concept of thin and thick stories. Hearing you talk about how the family communicated, it sounds so much like these thin stories that is so familiar to me. And I'll pivot to Hugh and Gabriel to see if those things seem familiar in your current life as 11th graders in high school. But according to the CDC, they say 42% of teens experience persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness. And Steve, hearing your story and your feeling of hopelessness when you're turning to your family for support, can you just talk a little bit about how that made you feel while you're hanging on to these heavy issues and impact of the trauma? Was there a compounding effect when you opened yourself up and didn't feel that level of care that you might have been expecting?
Yes, though. I mean, yes, it hurt. Yes, it was really difficult. But on the other hand, that's how I was raised. So that's the interesting thing here, is that I knew how to push down feelings. Right? That was something that was ingrained in me. So it felt all familiar. So as painful as it was so familiar. So I just kind of went on with my life. Now, we talk about it more later, but what that meant was that not only was I not whole, but I did a lot of things that were damaging to myself and to others. So I carried this, not just the impacts of the abuse, but the impacts of, of lack of emotional connection into other relationships, and definitely abused alcohol. I was very loud, boisterous, and disruptive in school. I was insensitive. Like, I didn't help people in a way that I should have. I used other people. And it's things that for a long time I've regretted. And, thanks to our meeting, Alex, and being able to have deeper exploration of the whys, I've come to a place where I realize that while I can still feel bad about those things, I don't blame myself. And, I take the opportunity now to do this type of work to say, okay, how can I better myself through these conversations? And then how can we all kind of learn collectively from our experiences to help others kind of not go down that path?
Well, the one word that just keeps on coming back to me is courageous. And I'm grateful for your courageousness in speaking out, Steve. But then I have to pivot to my two co-hosts who are both high school students who have stuck their necks out by, helping to lead a podcast talking about these issues at such a young age. And the benefits we all can receive from hearing that perspective is immense. But now I want to turn it to Hugh and Gabriel to get your thoughts so far on what you've heard.
Well, I think that you asked earlier, what does the state of male mental health and masculinity look like today or right now? And I would say that it's genuinely an understatement to say that it's in a bad place right now. I think that a lot of what we hear around the news and in school is about obviously domestic issues right now, international problems. But I think that it's important to take a minute and reflect on ourselves and figure out what's causing what's happening around us. And you can look at suicide rates, school shootings, all of these problems that you hear on the news don't just happen naturally and they just don't come out of thin air. They all start from a cause. And I think that in many statistics we've heard, school shooters are almost all male white men who are clearly in a bad mental state. And I think that that is definitely a major problem that's come throughout the years. And it's definitely because, like Steve was saying, people are forced to put their feelings down and hide them, kind of shove them under the carpet. And then the way that they express them is through these acts of shootings or even suicides because they feel like they have no other way to express it. And I think that we really need to fix that. We really need to have outlets for people to express themselves. And I hope that this podcast serves as an outlet for people to listen and reflect on themselves, because obviously these problems around the world are not coming naturally. They're coming from how we've grown up, what we've seen around us, what people are telling us to do, what people are telling us to feel. And I think we need to take a minute and just reflect on ourselves rather than force ourselves to be a certain way.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that's just been said. And also, first, I just wanted to say thank you so much, Steve, for sharing your story. And I think often many people across the world, both male and female, experience issues of mental health. But I think often the first time that you hear this issue is after you hear that they committed suicide, because I think that the state of mental health and masculinity is in, as you said, a really, really bad place right now, just because so many people experience these feelings. But the difference is that they're not just experiencing these feelings and opening up to everyone and being heard, is the fact that they feel that they're not able to express these feelings. And because of that, these feelings are kept inside themselves, and it just grows and grows and grows because they feel like they have no one to express these feelings to. And since they don't have that, then these feelings just grow, and it leads until sometimes suicide and very bad effects. Because I know I'm very passionate about this issue, and there's like males make up 50% of the population, but they make up 80% of all suicide deaths in the US, according to the CDC. And I think news, like statistics like that, is so scary because it makes us kind of see how really devastating the scene of mental health is right now, because so many males don't think that they have people to talk to about this issue because it's just seen as some quick fix, but in reality it's not, and it really needs many people to speak up on and make it seem like there is actually clear people that you could talk to and make it seem like it is okay to have these issues. But the main thing is you have to speak up and to make it feel like people can be heard, so they don't have to suffer in silence anymore, which I know a lot of people suffer with.
So Hugh and Gabriel, you both brought up this, topic of the impact of socially constructed masculinity, and Gabriel, you mentioned the statistics on suicide. But can you go a little bit more deeply? Because in episode 1, we did talk about, this concept of socially constructed masculinity versus aspirational masculinity. I'd like to focus on that socially constructed masculinity first, and just understand, how do these traditional views and societal expectations of that socially constructed masculinity impact mental health that could lead to these horrible outcomes of suicide or gun violence or sexual violence or domestic violence?
I think I can take that first, because I think most of the traditional views of masculinity, it often like discourages men from seeking help because they make it seem like it's not cool or you're not a real man if you seek help and look for help. But in reality, it's quite the opposite. Seeking help and even needing help makes you a true man, because that shows that you really can embrace your full self as a man and show all of your emotions, when in reality, that's what makes you a true man. But I think these traditional views have often made it seem like if you need help or if you're trying to look for help, it kind of takes away from your masculinity. But if you actually don't look for help, that can just further put you down this rabbit hole and lead to substance abuse, worse mental health issues, and anxiety, which I think is topics that all need to be talked about a lot more, and recognize that looking for help is the right thing to do. And that's what makes you a true man, not the opposite way around.
So have you experienced in your life where you've known that you've needed to get some help or support, but because of that perception blanket that is covering you, you don't want to appear weak or soft or vulnerable? Do you have examples of that you could share?
Well, yeah. So I think me in my own personal life, I think everyone has had their own struggles, but I think often, yeah, I have, especially as a teenage male in like a high school or academic stress, and there's so many stressors that are working on you. I also felt like I didn't really have any space to really talk to anyone about how I was feeling. And those kind of feelings of stress and anxiety and even sadness all kind of weighed me down. And it kind of just made those feelings worse. But I think once I eventually like felt the courage to talk to my family or even like really close friends, I think the weight kind of it lifted off my back, and I realized that I actually do have people who I can talk to, even though I know many people don't feel like they can, but in reality they do have these people. But it's just that one step that happens, and once you take that step, then you realize that you have these people, and it's so important to really reach out and speak to people.
And I'll say also, from your first question about socially constructed masculinity, I'd like to answer about how the effect that has. I think listening to Steve's story and many survivors I've heard, there's almost a common thread of how socially constructed masculinity forces us to put our feelings away. And I know Steve said that it took 10 years for him to tell anyone that he was sexually assaulted. And I think that 10 years is obviously this big weight to carry. And what's stopping you from releasing that are these expectations and what people are telling you. And you can also see kind of the effect that carrying that weight of not expressing your feelings has on people. And I know we talked about suicide rates and school shootings and such. I think those are two examples, I would say, just as seeing how that the effect that socially constructed masculinity has, because I think that most of these people, obviously, who are doing those acts have this deep weight inside of them that is being blocked by this barrier of socially constructed masculinity. And I think that's solely because they don't have access to outlets of aspirational masculinity, or ways or things that make them feel like they're not alone in this journey. Because I think that's definitely a feeling that people struggle with, and that also pushes them back, is the feeling of being alone, or that it's not normal, which also comes from the people around them telling them these socially constructed ideas that, that's don't express your feelings, put them down, they're not normal, be happy. The only emotion that males can express is anger, happiness. I think that that's a lot of what we hear, and that you can see the effect that has just on the general population. So I'd say, yeah. And then to answer your second question, I think that there have been experiences similar to Gabriel, I'd say, where I've been really stressed out with something, whether it be work or just all these things building up, maybe even like friendships and relationships. I think that those all build up, and not releasing them has probably put me in a bad state, and at some times, or just kind of left me thinking, like, what do I even do here? Because if I say something, what are people going to say? And if I don't say something, it's going to stay with me. So, but I think the solution is always saying something, because there are people around you who will help you, and who will give you more support than you actually think, rather than backlash, which you might expect.
With what you just said, Hugh, the first thing I thought of was this concept of the outside in versus the inside out. And, I look back on my experience with young people when my daughter was assaulted. I was hoping to believe that most people thought inside what happened was extremely wrong, and understood inherently, I hope, that the right thing to do would be to offer my daughter support after she spoke up about her sexual assault. But there seemed to be so much pressure from the outside in to conform, to rally around the perpetrator, to not acknowledge that anything was wrong with the school culture and environment, and to just move on with their life and not let this thing distract them. And so I want to throw out another concept for all of us to discuss about this feeling. Steve, you talked about the importance of outward, happiness and joy, while I imagine there is a tempest, going on inside, and fighting that constantly. Let's talk about the pressures and the things that cause that, and maybe some things we can do to address that, whether it's for ourselves or for others.
Yeah, I as we're having this conversation, a couple of thoughts along those lines came to my mind, and it's important to state, is like, I firmly believe that humans want to connect and they want love. I firmly believe that men want to connect and they want love. So if we start with that as foundational, this isn't men are good, men are bad, men are nurtured or natured into violence and destruction at various scales. That is a result of, I think, this conversation around socially constructed masculinity. Like, what do we want as men, as younger men, Gabriel and Hugh, and older men as me and Alex.
Speak for yourself, Steve.
Yeah, well, I'll speak and then you can validate it. It's belonging. We want to belong to something. We want to be accepted. We want to have connection. And we want love. And we want self-love. And we want others to love us. But if we go back to kind of the foundational early childhood development around how, in particular, boys are raised, there is a form of violence. So by not allowing somebody to express their feeling, by not nurturing those conversations, by not allowing boys to cry and saying, well, don't do that, right? That is a form of early, minor violence that builds up over time that gets expressed in a whole host of more destructive violence, including, the far ends of the spectrum, like suicide and school shootings. But there is, for many, maybe even most men, daily forms of that violence that are much more prevalent that we really don't talk about. And that, leads to things that, as you just alluded to, Alex, so you just brought up, which is sexual violence, domestic violence. These are common, extremely common. 1 in 4 women, 1 in 6 men are victims or survivors of sexual violence. Domestic violence, until 20 or 30 years ago, was legally permitted, and in some places is still accepted. There's been a lot of places we see them in trials all over the place, is still accepted. So when you have a situation where you push down kind of the important things about human connection, and you're so focused on finding acceptance and belonging, but you're not looking at the quality of that acceptance and belonging, like we see it in the rise of these various polarized groups that come together for very violent purposes, stated violent purposes. But they are looking, what they're looking for is something, and they're getting it. But it absolutely feeds a self-hatred that then has to come out in various ways that oftentimes are violent towards women, certainly violent towards themselves and broader society.
So, Steve, I love the fact that you started this with something so positive in terms of what men truly want, which is connection and love. But those are 2 words that I don't think are in the normal lexicon of my 2 co-hosts in terms of the high school male world that they live in. But I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on what Steve said, because I do believe it's a universal human desire for love and connection. But so tell me what your guys' immediate reaction was when you heard Steve say that.
Well, I was kind of, I think, like nodding my head for sure. Like I was kind of smiling and nodding my head because I think that it is completely true. Whether people hide it or not, I think that everybody does want love or to be loved. And I think that's just obviously a natural human emotion. And, some people might say like, well, girls want to be more loved or want love more than boys. But I honestly don't even think that that's necessarily true. I think that people only think that because boys hide it more and because they're forced to hide it. So I would say I was definitely, I definitely agreed with what Steve said because I think everyone wants love in their life.
Do you find it hard to either hear that emotion expressed to you or to express it yourself? Because I know, like, I've grown into a habit of saying to Steve, after we talk, I love you, Steve. And Steve says it to me. And but it is a practiced thing that I needed to overcome, because there's like this hesitation to say, hey, I'm a man. I don't say I love you to another man. But, if you think about it for 2 seconds, it sounds so ridiculous, right? Why shouldn't we be experiencing something that is universal? Why do we deny ourselves or have the feeling that we need to be ashamed of that feeling? But how, tell me.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that, well, I say I love you to, I think my mom and my dad and I'd say my siblings like more often, but I definitely as well, I say I love you to, my friends, kind of just more simply, like, a lot of people say like, love you, bro, or something like that.
Mhm.
And I do agree with you though. I think it comes off like as like there's a bit of hesitancy. But I think that no one's like objecting to it when they hear it. And that goes back to Steve's point, like no one's against love, So I would say I do say it also as well to my friends. And there's some slight hesitancy, I'd say, but um I think that also just comes from maybe I'm more like vulnerable with my mom or my dad. Um, but yeah, I would say that I think it's normal and I think that people should express it because I have great friendships and there's no point in like hiding um, what I think or um I don't know, yeah.
Yeah. And I think I agree with what you said, Steve, on how everyone wants to be loved. But I think also everyone wants to love someone else too. I think that's also an incredibly important part of the spectrum. But I think this also often goes hand in hand with people are often very scared to express this love to someone else because they're scared that that this love won't be reciprocated. And they think that they won't get this feeling back. And that often restricts so many people from expressing this feelings of love, even if it's the people who do love them back, even if it's like family members, but they feel that they have this inner kind of worry if it's not going to be expressed back to them. And this often holds, I think, so many people from really engaging in deep relationships with, even if it's platonic or romantic, both by kind of having this worry about expressing love. And I think often so many people, you can't really see on the outside. And I think this remains true amongst a lot of even celebrities, but I know a lot of celebrities speak out about this, like Michael Phelps, Ryan Reynolds, Billie Eilish. I think those are all three really famous celebrities that have really talked about the importance of mental health. And when you think of those three people, I'm assuming you got to think of these incredible people who are so talented and seem so amazing to have all of these amazing lives. And even though it might come across like that, even the most popular celebrities still have inner issues and they still struggle with mental health. And I think it's so important to recognize that mental health issues isn't just an issue that people who might be like some middle schooler struggle with, or someone who maybe is not doing well in the job, but even someone who's a top actor, a top athlete, a top singer can also still struggle with these issues. And it's not solely like separated from these people, and everyone experiences these issues. And once I think people recognize that no matter who and everyone can experience issues of mental health, I think that will really kind of change this whole stigma around it and make it more acceptable, and people understand a lot more about all the complexities of mental health.
Well, that's the interesting thing about the socialization aspect of it. It kind of struck me when you were talking about the environments in which it's safe to say certain things. So with your family, with many families, this isn't the case. Like my family was not we love you family. We exhibited other ways, but that's not as direct and effective because you don't really feel it. But if it is in your family and it's safe in your family, then when you get to the playground, then when you get to the elementary school, then when you get to your sports teams, like it seems to become harder and harder and the expressions of love come out in, like you said, love you, bro. It gets watered down, or a high five. I probably not, you're going down that list, hugging, and then saying what Alex said, I love you, which there's something about that is so hard and gets harder and harder as a man to say as life goes on. So it's funny when I think of the topic of this, which is mental health, which is so very, very important in kind of the therapeutic setting. But when you think about these types of things that we can do in our everyday life, is think about intentionality around what I want to communicate, where I feel safe to communicate that. And part of it is being direct around understanding your own feeling of love, then being able to communicate that feeling of love.
Well, we use the word courage a lot. And to me, again, this word courage pops up again, because I saw a lovely social media post on this Love You Bro campaign that came from New Zealand. And there was a series of videos of these big, very macho looking islanders, looked like they were all players from their rugby team. And there would be such pause and hesitation, and then an explosion of emotions, when just to build up the courage to say, love you, bro. I was just calling to say I love you. And that I find as the single biggest tragedy for us men, that we are emotional beings. And if we're emotional beings, we should be thriving with our emotions, so we could all experience the fullness and wholeness of life and who we are. And the viewers can't see me, but just talking about this, I've expanded my body just without even thinking about it. And if I think about what I'm confined to by society in terms of anger being the emotion that is most normal and safe for me to express anytime, and how many times do we manifest that every day? When you're driving, when you're walking on the sidewalk, when you're doing anything outside, you're looking for reasons to be angry because you need some way to express what's inside of you. But that's the only safe emotion. And that drives me crazy now thinking about that with this conversation, because I look at 4 people on this, 4 boxes on this podcast, and what the emotion that I feel when I'm talking with you guys is one of love and care, and one of wanting to support you. And when I feel that way, I feel like I can run out and accomplish so much. And I think about how much we're losing as a society by constricting all of us to live within these confined spaces of who we are. And that actually gets me angry in a strange way, right? And because if I care deeply about each one of you, and I care about my audience members, and I care about the communities that we go out and speak to with I Have the Right To, I want to connect with them. I want to make eye contact. I want them to feel the warmth of someone saying, I care about you. And I want to support you if you're going through any difficult times. And it does make me upset that there's so many people in need. Again, the data all says it, right? There's so many of us in need. And a simple thing like a comment of, love you, bro, I'm here for you, to someone can make their day. Or eye contact with someone that you don't know on the street, and recognition of them as a human being. And I don't know what your guys' daily life is in high school, Hugh and Gabriel, but you're living in this environment right now. What are you seeing? Is there any signs of hope for our audience in terms of how you are experiencing life, and maybe some of the things that you're doing to evolve or change things?
I think there definitely is. And just going back to one of the earlier things you said about these words of affirmation and saying things like love you, bro. And I think that is very powerful. But I think just the addition of saying I love you, bro, or even I think that singular word I makes it so much more powerful because it completely changes it just from this idea of love to the fact that someone else is doing the loving to you. I love you. That singular word I makes it, for at least for me, so much more powerful because it makes it seem like there is someone else who does love you. It's not this idea of love you too or love you, bro. It's this idea of I love you, bro. So someone else is experiencing this love for you. And I think it makes it so much more powerful. And I do see this amongst my friends. And I do think that in high school, kind of going back to the question you just asked, is there is obviously still a lot of issues with mental health. And I think people still don't recognize it, but I think there is this expanding kind of care and understanding of these issues amongst in school. And we have this club at our high school that Hugh and I are a part of called Boys Leading Boys. And we talk about these issues of masculinity and men's mental health. And I think it is another club about women's athletes and mental health as well. And I think so this idea of mental health is ever expanding at the high school level too. But I think it's always a area that can always be improved because it is such an important topic that doesn't be talked about. But I think this idea of I and love you is, I think I always come back to that. And I think that's such a crucial thing because it really deepens the connection in such a way that I think people can't even fathom when they say it. But it has such a deep, I feel, connection.
I agree. I completely agree with you, Gabriel, about that. I thought that I was kind of like taken aback by when you said that, the I love you, because I think that I thought back to experiences with that, and I think that it's completely more powerful to know that there's like someone on the other side of it saying like the other person loves you, you know? So it's not just that concept like of love that can feel a little awkward to think about in some ways, and that's why I think people add like the bro to it, because it makes it's like love you, and then there's kind of like a little bit of like socially constructed masculinity in it, if you will.
You're growling and reminding everyone, but I'm a man.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that saying there, I think there's three things. It's like I love you is definitely the highest, and there's like love you, bro. And I don't think there's a point in watering it down, because I think that it holds back the that kind of personal element to it. And then what was your next question? Oh, the state of mental health. I think that I did say at the start, you know, it's in a bad place overall, but I think that I am doing everything I can to try to improve it. Gabriel and I are, us four on this podcast, have taken attention to it and are trying to mitigate this serious issue, is how I would describe it, because, you know, I think that in our school, Gabriel mentioned like BLB is definitely a place where people come, and you can see also in BLB the watered down versions of like whatever people say, whether it's like adding a bro to it or anything like that. But I think that many people talk openly in that group, and I think that it's a great space to express mental health and that you're not alone, like we said. And so I think in my own life, I think that club and what I've seen around me has is mental health is improving, especially a focus on men's mental health. But I think we need to draw attention to the whole world on this issue.
You know, all of this talk around love, and in my prep notes for this, the word love really wasn't sort of written as a topic I wanted to circle around, but it is amazing to see how much of this has organically circled around that concept. And I wrote a note to myself that I think we need to do an episode completely on the topic of love, because we are loving beings, And if it is so hard for us to say that simple word that, carries so much, maybe it's overwrought meaning. Maybe we need to relax and just understand by nature we are loving beings, and that expression is not a form of, or is it a form of commitment? Is it a form of a promise to someone, right? And that bears responsibility and accountability. And maybe we actually need more of that, because I think of all of the people that we are in community with that are lonely, that do feel that heavy burden of sadness and helplessness. If we love our community, if we love ourselves, if we care about other people, shouldn't we be reaching out to them and checking in with them and letting them know that they are part of this broader community of love and they are worthy of support? And that's something I don't think in our current world of our economic model, our masculinity model, we're not wired or rewarded for thinking about, right? And if you are not on the privileged side of things, just think about how difficult life is in terms of just doing normal activities.
Just real quickly on the self-love piece, and I completely agree with what you're saying, Gabriel. Like, love is meant to be given and received. It's a shared emotion. But if you don't have it for yourself, it will not be shared. You can't share it.
Yeah.
And it's that self-love piece of it. I think through paying attention to mental health, through various forms of therapy, you can access that and understand the self-esteem, self-loathing, self-love, to get to a point to be the word that keeps going through my mind. Maybe it's too hyphenated. I'm never good with things like that, but cycle breaker. Like these things, like Hugh, you just said, or Hugh and Gabriel just said that, I love you. That's a cycle breaker. Being in a group of men who are disparaging to other men who are not like them, or to women, saying something, well, wait a minute, this doesn't make me feel good. Like, we shouldn't be doing this. That's a cycle breaker. And, I just real quickly, anecdotally, I've seen it in my own life, not in high school, but this may or may not be an encouraging or discouraging comment, but there are people who fast forward 4 decades, 5 decades, 6 decades, still act like they're in high school. Like, because that whole self-actualization isn't occurring, because it's not really promulgated in society to say, okay, you finish educational learning, we go into learning our craft or our career, and we stop developing, or maybe we had stopped developing, like I said earlier, when we were 3 and we didn't get the response we needed. But I will say that I was in a text chain with 10 or so friends from prior lives, where it was very much about movies. There would be pictures of women. There would be all sorts of things. And then thankfully, Alex, you and your family came into my life, and I realized, wait a minute, you don't think about it. If you don't think about something you've done for 40 years, you will not stop it. You will not say something. And when I said something, I said, this is not okay. This is really damaging to ourselves and to others. Not everybody agreed with me. That's fine. But a handful did, and we've been able to go on to develop a more meaningful relationship. So when I do think about your question on what's there to be hopeful for, cycle breakers will appeal to other men who feel the same way, who either don't know another way or are afraid to take that first step, but will follow with their heart if we give them that opportunity.
Amen. So cycle breakers, it sounds difficult. All it is a simple connection. Are you okay? I just wanted to let you know I appreciate you. I care about you. Or even, God forbid, I love you. And on that note, we have hit our time. And Mr. Peacock, I want to thank you for being our guest on today's podcast. Gabriel, Hugh, thank you so much for your commitment to this work. And to our audience, I want to express our appreciation and a sincere thank you for listening today. Thank you so much for listening. Like and subscribe to the podcast on all platforms. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends about Aspire. Follow us on social media at I Have the Right To. Learn more about our student and executive programming at our website at ihavetherightto.org.